I am thrilled to today's guest. I'm a fan. This is the first time we're chatting, and I'm really excited. I'm with Michael Smerconish. He is, of course, the host of CNN Saturdays, 9 to 10 a.m. Smerconish on CNN Saturdays. He's also the host of Michael Smerconish Program weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on POTUS Politics, SiriusXM. I believe it's channel 124. If that's not enough, he's authored 7 books, 2 New York Times bestsellers. His latest book is, I love the title. I haven't read it yet, but I love the title. Titled Clowns to the Left of Me, Jokers to the Right, American Life in Columns. It's kind of a compilation of 100 of his newspaper items. He is one of the guys that makes sense all the time today in the media, which is highly unusual. He is, like myself, a radical centrist, I think. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, but it's nice to have you here. Thanks for taking the time, man.
I should end this interview right now. It's not going to get any better than that.
No, we'll keep it high, Mark. But you've been doing this a while. I didn't realize that you were on CNN for 10, 12 years, and same thing with Sirius. So how did you even stumble onto this in the first place?
I had unique political experiences at an early age.
You worked for George H.W., right?
I did, right. And Donny, that grew out of, I've spent my whole life in a 50-mile radius, Philadelphia and those, inner suburbs that you hear so much about.
I'm a Penn guy, so I love Philly.
Okay, I'm a Penn guy too for law school. So You understand the turf. And I was very fortunate in that I caught a political bug when I was a senior in high school at a public school outside of Philly. And I had these unique political experiences when I was still young that culminated in me being asked to provide election commentary for the local network affiliates when I was in my early 20s. And the ego of it consumed me. And I hoped that I had a skill set for it. And although I was going to law school and then I practiced law for a decade, this was always something that I wanted to do.
It's funny. You're very honest about the ego thing. I've had a previous life also. I worked in advertising for a lot of years. And when you do this broadcast, cable, social media, podcast, whatever, it's exhilarating. You feel like you're connecting with people. There's a high from it that I get that people often say to me, why do you do this? And you don't do business anymore. Somehow I know I personally love when somebody stops me on the street and wants to talk to me about what I've been talking about, and they're engaged. And it's just, there's such a connectivity to it that I get a rush from it.
I do too. And look, I'm basically a radio guy. I know that perhaps your audience, if they know me for someone who hosts a program on CNN on a weekly basis and does a lot of work there. But for 30 plus years, I've had some kind of a position on radio, either in Philadelphia in a variety of time slots or on a syndicated basis. And then for the last 11 years on SiriusXM.
I love so much of what you talk about is one of our big problems is the polarization. And you have a great school bus analogy that I love that is so brilliant that kind of is a little bit of a metaphor for kind of what's wrong with us, what's not right with us today. Talk to me about the lack of school, that half the people in this country are driving their kids to school privately, which blew me the fuck away.
All right. So you've done your homework and I applaud that. I have a speech that I'm currently delivering to private groups and public groups across the country. I'll be in Toronto on Monday. I'm delivering it to all the elected judges of
it's a great
Pennsylvania.
Speech. I got a copy of it. It's a great speech.
Thank you for that. So I opened the speech by talking about my own experience riding the public school bus to public schools outside of Philadelphia when I was in elementary school, and just the lessons learned on that bus, not about the 3 R's, right? But instead about social interaction, about friendship, about respect for the driver up front. And when I read a story recently in the Washington Post that said that more than half of American kids are now being driven to school by their parents, I thought, that's horrible. That's a terrible example of where we're heading in such disparate directions. All those lessons that I learned, including how to moon, came from the public school bus. And if kids aren't on that bus, sometimes getting roughed up, telling jokes, maybe chatting with girls for the first time in their life, that's not a good thing.
No, and look, obviously you also talk about technology, which on the one hand, people get as the great connector. I think it's the great disconnector. You also talk about what's happening post-COVID with people. I think people not going into the workplace is the biggest Jewish word shanda that you can possibly have. Young people are not getting mentored. They're not. The thrill of work for me was going to work And young people are just, I so worried psychologically what we're going to have 20 years out from a group of people that, starting with the school bus, going into social media, now going into a workplace that they're not connecting, in that we are going to be in this disconnected, siloed, more than ever polarized world.
Right. And so I'm familiar with all of the books that have been written on this subject. I used to see them individually. Now I see them as complex parts of the same puzzle. But Putnam, who wrote Bowling Alone, Bill Bishop, who wrote The Big Sort, Gene Twangy, who wrote iGen, Robert Haidt, who most recently wrote The Anxious Generation. And when you read them all together, you understand that it's the polarization brought on largely now by technology, making it easier for us to find the like-minded, which is great if you have some unusual hobby. But in a political world, it makes it easier for us to associate with people who already agree with our viewpoints. And we are no longer joiners the way that our parents were. We're not in a bowling league. We're not in the Elks Club. We're not in the Lions Club, or whatever the local affinity group might be. And consequently, we're no longer together having common experience. Final thought, unless we can put that back together, we'll never solve these problems.
You talk about landslide counties, which also kind of blew me away. The exponential growth, landslide county defined as what? Take it from there.
Landslide, okay, roughly 3,000 counties in the United States. Landslide county described as one that's won by 20 or more points in a presidential election. If you go back to 1980, I'm doing this from memory, but I'm pretty secure in it, 391, or I would say only.
I'm going to check you on it. I'm going to check you on it. Let's see if you got this right, okay?
Okay.
I have that here in my notes also.
Only, I think, 391 landslide.
Perfect. You got it. You got it, 1980.
Oh,
and
shit.
In 2020, how many?
I'm going to say 1,750.
26. Good enough. We'll get the points for that.
Okay, but the point is, this is the key thing. We all know what gerrymandering is. We do the census every 10 years. We redraw the legislative boundary lines. We don't redraw county boundary lines. Think about the county wherever you might live as you're watching or listening to this. So what does that tell us? It tells us there's self-sorting taking place among us. We are exercising our ability to live and associate with the like-minded, which when you throw this into the mix of the school bus, going our separate ways, technology, kids not dating, it's really a bad picture, and it all speaks to the same issue: lack of common experience.
The concerning thing for me is that every trend is going to exacerbate it, not solve it. I don't know. You know, it's interesting. And I have some friends that are Trumpers and some friends that are Democrats, and you can't get through to anybody because everybody's in their own echo chamber. So you'll tell somebody something, a fact that you know, or an opinion or a thought, and then they will send you something that completely refutes it from wherever. It could be anywhere from Fox News to some, blog or anything, or the same side on the other side also. And it's almost, we now have bespoke media for ourselves. And I don't know how we get out. I understand the problem, and I'm right with you, and I think you articulated it so brilliantly. And as I'm a problem solver, I don't know what the answer is.
So I'm on a one-man crusade for awareness, and among the things that I preach, I'm now holding it in my hand, the television clicker. Use that fucking remote. Change the channel. I don't go to bed at night unless I've tuned into my own network. I've looked at Hannity. I've looked at MSNBC, and I'm getting the full package. And Donny, something you might not know, my passion project is not my radio show. It's not my television show. It's
the Mingle Project.
It is the Mingle Project and my daily newsletter, because every day I am cranking out to more than 100,000 people for free, but we've got 126,000 subscribers as of today. Aggregated news links that I personally select, 20 of them every day, just to try and provide balance. And even if you get stuck by a paywall, if you scan in the morning the headline and the lead and the outlet, you'll have a good vibe or good feel for what's going on in the course of a day. That's what we got to do. Mix up our news sources and become joiners again. Get active in your community, whatever that community might be.
Let's get into the news. The last 3 weeks, 3 stunning events, obviously starting with the debate performance of Biden, to the thank God failed assassination attempt of Trump, to Biden stepping aside, to now Kamala stepping up. I can't think in my lifetime of 3 weeks in politics that have had such dramatic twists and turns. And everything in my gut tells me that in the next 3.5 months, we're going to have a bunch of twists and turns also.
I so agree with you. I'm fond of saying on radio that there are people whose names we don't know, and events that we could never forecast that are about to unfold. And even though I'm the one who always says it, the last couple of days, oh my God, I never could have seen it coming. And I'm absolutely with you in saying, and still a lot of shoes to drop that we can never forecast. The only thing I keep in mind as I say that is, gone are the days when it's like election day is November 5. No, we resolve this on November 5th. People are going to start voting in 60 days. Yeah. Gone are the days where the kids go back to school at Labor Day and then we focus on politics. They'll be voting soon.
As a Democrat, I was disappointed that it was, I don't want to say handed to Kamala because she's the vice president, but you know the chain of events that led to, she's got the delegate. I mean, it's her. I thought the Democrats missed a marvelous opportunity to do some type of open situation. Delegates choose 4 candidates. It would have been messy. It would have been bloody, but I think the voters would have won. I think Kamala could have very easily won, and I think she would have come even in a better light to people. I think it was a missed opportunity, and I think the Democrats would have had 4 weeks of excitement and circus and theater. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
You're a guy who knows a little something about the media. Can you imagine the tune-in factor for the Democratic National Convention if there really was going to be a decision made at the convention as to who it will be? There's already a perception among some that it was handed to her because Vice President Biden said that he wanted a woman who was going to be on the ticket. All the better, I imagine, at the time when it was a woman of color. And now, instead of combating that perception, like letting her earn it. And by the way, when she announced that she was in it, I noticed that her statement said she looked forward to earning it. You heard Speaker Pelosi say this. Jim Clyburn said what you said. James Carville wrote an op-ed. Even that Clooney op-ed in the New York Times put forth the idea of there being competition. So all of these very bright political people all saying the same thing. But you know, Donny, if you build it, will they come? Because it's been so forecast for her. I don't know, even if there had been competition, if Josh Shapiro would have gotten into it, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom. I don't know, but I agree with you in the abstract. And you know who's suffering for it?
The voter. She's suffering.
Yeah, but it would have enhanced her candidacy.
I thought she looked strong yesterday. I thought she, obviously she doesn't have the shackles that any vice president has of, somebody on top of them and not overshadowing and whatnot. So there was a looseness I hadn't seen before. And I love that line when she said, Donald Trump, I know guys like you. I'm missing the words, and the whole prosecutor thing. It's going to be fun to watch. It is going to be fun to watch Trump go up against a prosecutorial woman of color. So I like that match.
I liked your descriptor of relaxed. I thought she was much more relaxed than I would have expected her to be. And I think that line she delivered reminded me of Michael Bloomberg, if you remember. I guess that would have been the 2016 convention when the mayor comes to the Democratic convention and he says, I'm from New York. We know a con when we see one. I thought it was hysterical then and hysterical when she said it yesterday.
I was really surprised at Trump's pick of Vance. I mean, it showed his hubris. He's doubling down. To me, it showed the confidence. But there was a missed opportunity for him to take a Youngkin or a Nikki Haley or whatnot. It doesn't get him one vote. What's your thoughts on that?
So I thought the genius move would have been Haley if she'd go along with it. And the fact that she spoke and said what she said at the convention caused me to think she would have been up for it.
I thought so.
I guess the play with Vance was rather than take Donny Deutsch's advice and try and get some suburban women, which would have been my inclination. I guess the idea was, hey, it's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Vance is not from any of them, but he's right in the heart of them. And maybe therefore he's got appeal with working class white guys whose fathers would have voted Democratic, but who can vote for me as a Republican.
He feels more dangerous to me than Donald Trump. There's something I find very sinister about him. I just happened to see the clip from a couple of years ago on Tucker Carlson, which was such a cruel statement talking about the cat women in this country that don't have children and they don't have a stake in this. They're miserable because of it. And they don't have a stake in this country because they don't have children. That's a cruel thought and a cruel thing to say.
So I don't know specifically what that reference is. I guess I should. I remember interviewing him when the book came out, both on radio and television. And it feels like it was a different J.D. Vance then. I mean, he was hailed on the left as a guy who was sort of an enlightened conservative. I've gone back and watched the movie. My only reaction is Glenn Close was awesome. I've always loved her work. She does a great job in that flick. I'm all for people changing their minds because I've sure as hell changed mine. I was a dyed-in-the-wool Republican for many, many years. So I just don't know if he's changed his view, if he's not the same guy that we thought that he was, or if he's just adapting to the times, given all that he said about Trump and now wants to be inside the tent instead of outside.
The Democrats, you know what's not complicated is whoever gets closest to the center wins general elections. It's not very complicated. And the Democrats have a real issue now with their base, with their coalition, so to speak. That you move one way on Israel, you lose a certain constituency. You move one way on in certain towards DEI, you move and lose. I don't want to say you lose another constituency. You have challenges. The Republicans, what they have going for them right now is just this dumbfounded single-mindedness, and the Democrats have a much more complicated road to get everybody under the tent.
So it's funny you bring this up because on radio today, we were talking about vice presidential selections for Vice President Kamala Harris. We were talking about Mark Kelly from Arizona. Guy calls me and he says, I don't like Kelly. Okay. Why don't you like Kelly? He was a Democrat, hardcore. And he said, well, he was very critical of Joe Biden and Title 42. He's like a tough guy on the border, to which I said, that's
yes,
perfect.
Yes.
That's exactly what she needs. And then he said, when Josh Shapiro is too much of a moderate. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what she needs. Because if it's another progressive, they're done. They're absolutely done. And
I don't think there's a chance. I think Kelly seems to be the guy, an astronaut, a vet.
Right.
Josh Shapiro, I just think, look, I'm a Jew. I think being Jewish is particularly in Michigan, is too much of a minefield to navigate. I love Josh Shapiro. I think he's one of the great young politicians today. It feels like, and everywhere you turn, it's going to be Kelly.
Yeah, as of today, I think so. I don't know that I agree with you on Shapiro, though. I would like to think, as a Pennsylvanian, I know Josh, I would like to think that it wouldn't be an impediment. I get it. We're breaking a lot of ceilings in this election if it's Kamala Harris and it's Josh Shapiro. I believe that Josh could close the gap in Pennsylvania more so than Kelly could in Arizona, because the gap
without question. I'm just worried about Michigan. Without those 300,000 votes, I don't know how you carry Michigan. So I think obviously Josh gets you Pennsylvania, or certainly gets you a lot closer. I think he pushes. I would be surprised if he didn't push over the top. I just worry about Michigan, and I hate to say it as a Jew. I'm just being a realist, and it pains me to say it.
Well, I mean, we're having these kind of candid conversations. Pete Buttigieg is a guy who someone else raised with me on the program today. And I said, I don't know that we're prepared to break all the ceilings in one cycle.
Yeah. No, she needs that a little bit more comfort food as far as on the side of her tech. And I think she'll do it. How do you see Trump? If right now you are in Trump's mind and in Trump's, he's got some smart people around him. What do you think the playbook against Kamala is? Obviously, they're going to go after the border, which they were going to go after one way or another, but now they do it, to the nth degree. What are your other thoughts on how they go at her?
I don't know that he's going to be able to contain himself. I mean, those first 3 nights at the convention when he sat there looking somber, passive, maybe it had been an epiphany moment for him. And then you watch the first 25 minutes of his speech. I naively thought, as I kept my eye on the clock, he started speaking at 10:35, and I'm like, wow, he's going to shut it down by 11, fade to black. It's been a great convention. And then he goes on for like 93 minutes. He just, as you well know him because you've known him for a long time, he can't control himself, right? Yeah. And so to answer your question, I think that his own worst instincts will kick in relative to her, and it'll really hurt him. It'll really hurt him. If he could be measured, he'd be unbeatable.
Yeah. And everybody had the same reaction. We watched it, and he did his 15, 20 minutes on, very touching on his surviving the assassination attempt. And if he had just done 5 or 10 minutes after that on basic unity and a couple of talking points, good night, drive safely, would have been a home run. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. I think he's not going to debate her. I think he's terrified. I think getting up against a prosecutor, getting up against a woman, getting up against a woman of color, I think he's shitting in his pants, and I think he's going to come up with every excuse not to debate her.
So I remember watching the debate with President Biden and tweeting and saying something like, Donald Trump, be careful what you wish for. And what I meant was, it's not that it was going so well for Trump, it was going so poorly for Biden. But I was thinking in that case, I get so many things wrong, but in this case, I was thinking 3 steps ahead. And I said, this is such a shit show for Biden. He's not going to end up being the candidate, and whomever replaces him has got to be stronger.
Yeah. That was painful to watch, because Joe Biden is what a decent man of service who has had a very successful presidency by just about every measure. We all know the tragedies he's lived through. Beyond being at least in my case, a rooting Democrat and seeing your team really being challenged, it was a painful human moment, because we all have parents and we've all seen that, and your stomach couldn't help but hurt.
Donny, I said on radio, we're kindred spirits in so many of these things. I said, this is not a political issue. It's a life issue. I don't need some fundamental understanding of science. It's not climate change. I don't need a map because I can't comprehend the Middle East. In this case, we've all been there. In my case, I remember how painful for my dad to surrender those car keys. We've all had loved ones close to us, and therefore everybody looked at it and said, it doesn't get better. And it's a shame, because I want his legacy to be protected, but it never had to get this far. He never should have put his name out there for re-election, and candidly, the people closest to him should have reined that in.
Yeah. Any thoughts? I mean, it would not be the craziest thing in the world for him to step aside and Kamala run as president the next 3 months. It's got pros and cons, but I've heard a couple of people throw that out, and it's not so crazy.
I can't imagine that he could accept that piece of humble pie. I can't. I think this was so much for him to agree not to run. That is a bridge too far. I could be wrong.
So give me your prognosis. How does the next 3 months play out? I want the Smerconish playbook. Thoughts, predictions. This is obviously, and you and I both agree that this story, we can't even imagine some of the pages in it, but I would just love your prognostication.
So I feel like the enthusiasm gap, it was just last week. The Republicans came out with apart from Trump going too long at the end, a pitch perfect convention. And yet I now see a complete momentum shift where people who were so depressed over what was going on, who are on the left, are now enthused about their candidate. I want to see if it moves the needle in any of the 7 battleground states. And my hunch is that it probably doesn't. I see Donald Trump going out and doing rallies and trying to stay on the script that those 3 around him have provided. But when he feels like the audience is getting bored, you can almost see the switch get thrown in his head. He'll say some things that are going to get him in trouble. The race will narrow at some point. I think that it will narrow, largely dependent upon who her VP selection will be. Probably Mark Kelly, probably not Josh Shapiro. In the end, though, unless he implodes, I give him a much stronger upper hand.
Yeah, you and I, we are kindred. I feel exactly the same way. Here's the $1 million question: what is an implosion for Trump? The line continue. Is it some horrible racial slip up, racist slip up? What would be an implosion?
That's why you're right in saying that there's great peril in him debating her. Because I think, I'm not saying that he's got a tendency to play the race card with her, but so easily in placating the worst elements of his base, I could see something said for which there's no interpretation. Unlike, good people on both sides. Then you say, well, go listen to the tape, because in context, it was different. I understand those moments, but something where there's no debate about how bad it was.
I've been one of the most outspoken, and it stuns me when I have this conversation with people and they look at me, they tilt their head, and they go, really? I see it very dark if Trump gets elected. I see it ranging from, all you have to do is read Project 25, ranging from things like MSNBC won't exist as we know them, things like the Resurrection Act, the Insurrection Act he's got the military report. We know he's going to weaponize the Justice Department. We know he wants the Fed to report into him. I even get to the point where I worry personally as somebody who's been very outspoken against him. And I say that, and people look at me. Some people go yes, and other people go, really? No, come on, you're too far out there. I see it happening in Technicolor.
You know, when he was elected, which I did not think was going to happen, I thought in the end that was never the way the 2016 was going to turn out. Then he wins the election, and I went on air and I said, I got to believe we're getting Studio 54 Donald. Because the things, you know him, Donny, I don't.
I thought he was going to turn around because we'd want all the rich, famous people, all the celebrities to like him.
Right.
So I said that the next morning show, I said, don't worry, he now can be Reagan. He's got his people. He was really clever.
Right.
Now he wants to be loved by everybody. It was the most obvious thing, and knowing him, that's what I thought he was going to do. I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah, well, okay, and I don't know him the way you do, but from the sidelines, that's because I always thought that was his core anyway, wanting to be liked, wishing that he could curry favor with the New York Times and that Saturday Night Live would make fun of him, but in a way that we all laugh together instead of laughing at him. And you know, like 2 Corinthians, I just can't believe in his heart this is where he's coming from. But he governed differently. I don't share your worst fears.
I'm glad to hear that.
Maybe because I think that there are guardrails even on January 6th that held, some would say by a whisker, but I think that there are too many institutional forces.
But if we didn't have, for instance, take the election, if we had somebody different than Raffensperger in there, somebody different in Arizona,
right,
game over.
Right. I'm worried. I'm not worried at Donny Deutsch's level, but I'm worried.
Okay, yeah. And I just, maybe it's just me, you know, I hope I'm wrong. I just want to be proved wrong. I see the people around him, and I just, I'm worried. And what's also challenging now, being in the media, you know, post the assassination attempt, you don't want to be saying, I want to say things that I believe, but I also don't want to be inflammatory. And so it's a little more challenging to prosecute the case against Donald Trump at this point.
Well, I think it would have been really difficult for President Biden to hang in and who knows what the vice president will do, but to make it all about the future of democracy, which, by the way, wasn't working for him anyway. If you notice, in the last 3-4 weeks, Biden had pivoted to, there's something different about Donald. He snapped. He's not the same guy, kind of giving an invitation to people who had voted for Trump in the past to come home now because he's not even the guy you thought that he was. So I don't know what the message is going to be. She is going to want it to be a referendum on him because that's what worked for Biden in 2020. He's going to want it to be a referendum on both Biden and Harris. I don't know on what, in the end, people vote more than their wallet, which will probably be the end.
Yeah. I think women are going to be. I think if Harris plays it right, and Trump and Vance continue to do some of the things they do and say, I've said this before, I think women are superior to men, and I think women could save this country.
So I think that's the sensitivity of how he treats her in a debate. I think it's also the sensitivity of how he treats her generally on the campaign trail. I mean, it was such a, I thought, political.
He called her dumb and vicious yesterday.
Right. Okay.
Dumb as a rock. Yeah.
So when the Biden announcement was made, it was such a perfect opportunity for Trump via Truth Social to say, everybody knows we've had our disagreements. The guy's had 50 years. I wish him well. I mean, let it go at that. But he just couldn't stop. He has to go after him, then go after her. And like where I am in the burbs of Philly, that's not how you win these people who don't like Trump, but maybe would vote for him. And if he would change his tone, even so, I mean, the base is with them. Wild horses couldn't keep them away. They can't wait to come out and vote against Kamala Harris. So I don't get it. Like you're the guru of messaging. Wouldn't you be telling him, Donald, take it down a notch?
All he had to do at that convention and continue on is be, I'm the great unifier. And this has to stop on both sides. He would have been unbeatable. Unbeatable. To your point.
How could he not know that? How could he not realize that?
Because I think in his core, he is such a fuck you contrarian. You know what I mean? That I'm supposed to do this and I don't have to do it and I'm not going to do it. I'm just doing some very amateur shrinking here. I think that's his nature, is like, no, that's what I'm supposed to do. And I'm Donald Trump and I'm going to do what I want to do. And I know better than everybody else. I think that's the simple kind of analysis of it. It is. Look, you got to give the guy kudos. You know, he is transparent. He is who he is. I have to respect the way he handled that assassination. You could not, as a human, go, Jesus, that's pretty damn fucking impressive to get up there.
Well, and listen, I was thinking something else. I was thinking about the waning days of 2020 in COVID when Biden was in Delaware taking advantage of having to stay there. And Trump was such a beast on the campaign trail with all of those rallies right up until the 11th hour. I think he earned some people's begrudging respect who didn't like him, but said, holy shit, look at this guy. He's the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah. That's what happened after every one of us, you could have been a super anti-Trumper. You go, hats off to that guy. I don't know. I probably would have been curled up in the fetal position.
Right. For the stamina, I get it. And the fortitude. People would be pissed at me just for saying it, but I agree. It's exactly how I saw it.
You got to give to. Hey, before I let you go, talk to me a little bit more in detail about the Mingle Project.
So the Mingle Project is me trying to get people to be aware of what is driving the big picture, the context of this election. I used to believe political polarization was our great undoing, that the influence of the media has this stranglehold now on our elected officials and on primary voters, and that it's this sort of vicious circle jerk of each of the above who are interested in mouse clicks, radio ears, television eyes, and the country be damned. And now I see it as a much broader picture. It's not only the media influence, it's not only gerrymandering, but it's also self-sorting. It's what we talked about earlier, how technology has made it easier for us to associate with the like-minded. It's poisoned. I'm not a Luddite, but I recognize the damage that it's doing to our kids. I mean, I'm a product of an era when there used to be something called a date. I'd have to use a push-button phone in the kitchen, and I would have to call her house and talk through the old man.
Wait, push-button. I used to have to use the dial phone.
Rotary, yeah, but think about the lessons of rejection. Think about needing to speak. I have sons. They get it all done with their thumbs today, but they're missing a lot of life lessons along the way. And you look at the loneliness data. You look terribly at the suicide data among our kids and among our seniors. And we've totally disconnected as a society and have got to put back those pieces, do things like our parents and grandparents did, and be active participants in our real life communities. And Bill Maher, and I give him credit every time I say it, he once did a commentary relatively on this same subject, and he used the word mingle. And I thought, that's it. In a word, that's what's lacking today. Get out of the house, go back to work, have a cocktail with somebody, break bread, and spend time with people who don't look like you.
Michael Smerconish, what a pleasure talking to you. I could do this for 10 hours. You could see him on CNN Saturdays at 9 a.m. Eastern, every day on Sirius Channel 124, the Michael Smerconish Program. He's a man of great thought and wisdom. Thanks for being here, my
Donny,
friend.
we're going to mingle together in New York. I'm going to look you up.
Do that. Let's do that. I'd love to go out with you. We'll have a few drinks. We'll have a few laughs.
Good.
You stay well, my friend. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.